Okay, another early morning walk here at Holden. I'm out a bit early today. It's 7 something. No idea what to talk about today, but it doesn't matter. The important thing is being out here, and I think I've said this before, but I sort of treat this like maybe it's a daily journal, I suppose, of what's going on. I've had a tendency in the past to bombard some of my friends with long, lengthy texts. I guess my whole life I've liked to use words, talk, maybe excessively, and it's always interesting because it's the same process. Like sometimes I would go out early morning in my backyard and just sit in a chair, and then I get this feeling of beauty from whatever's around me, that, just sitting out, watching nature or whatever it is, and then I have this urge to express something. Maybe it's a hidden poet inside myself that can't quite bring myself to write poetry. I always sort of felt that may be an inclination of mine. My mom was a poet. She was very proud of her published poem. But that being what it is, I think reflection's always been an important part of my life, and I guess what I always feel is when it sort of builds in you and then you want to share it, and I think I said this before, you see something beautiful and you want other people to see that beauty, and it's not the beauty of a painting or a song or whatever else. It's just the beauty of being, maybe, the beauty of awareness. Like nothing, just beauty. Sometimes there isn't anything, like when you have a sense that everything is just in the right place, that there's an order to everything, and it's not one particular thing, that you're admiring. It's just everything, and I guess some people might call that peace or tranquility. I think these can all be related, and it doesn't really have a cause, but I suppose you could say in a still environment, and why am I here and not in the middle of a bustling city? I mean, if I was in a city with people walking around, talking constantly, pushing, shoving, so much activity, it's like that would be very distracting because there's so much happening. And I like a place like this with minimal human activity. There's still a lot happening here. It's just it's not human activity. And human activity is driven by the mind and thoughts and our conditioning and our society. And the activity here is not, except for the guys over there and girls who are, some are volunteers, some are workers who are here always tirelessly preparing the grounds, which is also it's awesome to just recognize that, that every morning when I come here, I see a team of people working on this place, and I think, well, that maybe that should be my job, out here in nature every day, keeping the place up, making it beautiful, and for all of us to enjoy it, and that's a worthy goal. I mean, this place doesn't take care of itself. There is a lot of care that goes into maintaining this place, and maybe that's part of why I love this too, because it is a reminder of what humans maybe at their best can do. And I do really see this almost as humans at their best, like being in harmony with nature, and understanding the rhythms of nature, how every plant has its rhythm and its needs, and you know, there's an art to placing all these plants here so they bloom at different times of the year, and you know, putting the juxtaposition of, you know, the purple flowers and the pink flowers and all of this. I mean, I watched them plant all this, you know, as they transform, you know, a barren landscape in the winter to like a lush Garden of Eden. I mean, I can't help but think of that phrase, you know, from my Christian upbringing, but I always think of this almost as being like the Garden of Eden, because it's just so beautiful and like almost overwhelmingly beautiful. Like, I have no idea what other people think, but I'm not sure everyone really appreciates the immensity of this place, and just the immense beauty is almost overwhelming. You can't take it in intellectually, or you'd become focused on one particular thing. You know, you might look at this plant and go into great detail and analyze it and look it up and learn its genus and species and all about it. And, you know, you could endlessly just think about something like this, or it's just part of the whole here. You know, it's one part of the whole, and the whole, you know, everything taken together, it has a different flavor than dissecting things, analyzing things, you know, picking things apart. And I think that's very important. You know, I'm not trying to trick everyone, you know, using an analogy and then, you know, lead into some philosophical or religious or whatever you want to consider this sermon. It's just noticing something, observing, you know, that you can either focus on something small, or you can take in all the immensity at once. And I think this definitely applies to human life, human society, as well as to nature. The harmony of nature is what amazes me, that everything is here working together. I've never been particularly interested in learning a lot about any one thing, you know. And it's funny because we tend to jump to knowledge, acquisition of knowledge, you know. Some people, I think, you come here and then it's like, okay, I want to identify that tree and I want to identify that plant and that bird, and you know, it becomes like this. It's like you can't just appreciate something for its natural beauty without leaping to the acquisition of knowledge stage. And I guess I've done that somewhat in my life, but I would say less than other people. You know, I've always sort of felt maybe a presence, or felt the immensity throughout my whole life, like to where I almost find it silly when people jump to that mentation, you know, intellectualism, analysis. And it's funny because I ended up making analysis a large part of my career. It's what I do. I mean, my job as it stands right now is doing a lot of analysis, mathematical analysis, probabilistic analysis, engineering, scientific applications, problem solving. I have a presentation coming up next Monday that I'm giving at a conference on some research I've been doing using AI to create a bulletin, which is essentially a book, to advance a particular topic in what is called creep, metal creep. It's not the greatest word of all, but it's basically the slow deformation of metals that are under stress at higher temperatures for long periods of time, can cause those materials to deform slowly, and in our industry that we work in can cause failures, and failures can cause explosions, which can kill people and harm the environment and do other bad things. So a lot of the work that I do is to help keep equipment safe that is being used for industrial purposes, and this is good for the companies. It's also good for the workers, for people who live near such things, and also good for the environment. You know, we could talk a lot about, you know, the potential harm of industry to our society, but it also does provide certain benefits as well, right? So that's not something that I'm going to go into at the moment. But I think the point I was making was, you know, I'm preparing a presentation, I'm doing this research, it involves analysis, I'm discovering, I'm inventing things, and I use that word carefully because invention is not creation. Inventing new ideas, you know, that help advance particular areas of science and engineering. And that can be useful, right? What's not useful is when that runs amok. You know, when there's no love and compassion, no ethics driving this pursuit of technology and knowledge, we can get ourselves into trouble, and we see that. And it's at the point where it's very hard to see what's happening to our world because of this relentless pursuit of, you know, industry. And it's not industry, it's everybody, right? It's society is very ambitious, right? Everyone's ambitious. Ambition, you know, can be a very destructive thing, and it's driven by personal ambition is almost always behind it, right? Everyone trying to figure out how to be successful, how to make it big, and all the while really not asking themselves why they're doing that. Why are you seeking personal gain? Is it to survive, or is it for more than just survival? Because it doesn't take a lot to survive. And I think there's just this drive in us to just like see how far we can go. You know, like, well, if we can succeed a little, why not succeed a lot? You know, and it's not so much about having enough food and a place to live and, you know, meeting basic needs. It's like avarice, you know, gluttony, you know, that like people think they need to hoard wealth, hoard whatever it is, right? There's also been by insecurity and fear in the world, right? Not knowing what's happening and wanting security, physical security, financial security. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be, you know, physically secure. I mean, you know, every animal, every life form needs certain things to survive: food, shelter, you know, the basic needs essentially. We don't do such a great job as a society, though, in seeing that all of our constituents, right, every human being has those needs met. It doesn't seem that important. You know, it seems to be more important that we meet our own needs excessively. And this is sort of the difference when love and compassion aren't there. There's much more of a focus on the individual than on the whole. You know, and we started by talking about focusing on a part of something rather than the whole of something. And the whole human race or human society, you know, is composed of all these little humans, right, that think of themselves as separate individuals, but are really not separate individuals. And it's interesting that we've evolved to this point where there is this, you know, people think they're separate, you know, and they have this identity. And whatever you choose for that identity, you identify with that. You know, some people identify with, you know, a nation or a religion or even a family or a tribe or an idea, an ideology. You know, it doesn't matter what you choose to identify yourself with. I mean, even people that are so-called recluses that take themselves away from society identify perhaps with their asceticism, identify with their isolationism, or maybe with an idea. You know, they may give up everything in this world except for that idea of giving everything up. You know, the very idea of being in, you know, apart and minimalistic then becomes your identity. Like, your identity is then that. Your identity is then having no identity. And you haven't really lost your identity. You've just shifted it. Even if you shift it down to one idea or one very small thing. So you have to be careful to watch what you're doing in your life, because we can fool ourselves so many times into thinking that we're somehow advancing, right? And this is, you know, this is just like, you know, religious ambition can be just as bad as material ambition, right? The ambition to be a better person or a more holy person, or, you know, that is just as bad, if not worse, form of ambition. And you have to be careful of that. And I've seen this, you know, the holier than thou, right? There's many examples of that. People who think they're so holy, or they're so, I don't know what it is. They, you know, they can quote a holy book endlessly and think that gives them some sort of authority over others. Well, then you're just using that as another means to power your ego. And you just have to see that, right? There's no power in the words in a book. And people give it that power. And that's the shame. You know, because you're not really breaking out of anything then. You're just shifting your ambition from one of materialism to one of spiritualism or religion or whatever you choose to call it, right? To be free from all of that is very different than becoming attached to any one thing, no matter what that thing is, whether it's an idea, a person, a thing, you know, an object, whatever. Right? Freedom is free. It's not free from something either. It's not, because that's a reaction. You know, if you're free from, you know, smoking or something, right? Okay, great. But that's one thing. That's not freedom. Freedom is free from all conditioning. It's not from anything. You know, freedom is very much related to beauty, right? It's not wanting to be anything or desiring anything or holding on or attaching yourself to anything, whether it's a physical thing or an idea, you know. And that can be scary to a lot of people, because it's not what we normally do. We normally become attached to something, to somebody, some idea, and a society provides you with endless potential attachments, and it's only gotten worse. In our digital social media culture now, there's so many things you can distract yourself with, right? Take your pick. I mean, an endless supply of YouTube channels and Facebook and social media influencers and, you know, all these things that people become attached to, you know. And I think about this even just in my own lifetime, comparing it to when I was younger, and there were distractions, but there were fewer, you know. Like, we had, you know, television, obviously, for my generation was a big thing, and, you know, MTV and whatever else there was. I mean, all the network broadcast stations, fewer than we had now. And then, of course, cable television came along and provided us with many more potential distractions, and music. I mean, always something happening, right? But there's always something faddish or stylish, you know, that you can get caught up into at the moment. And then when you reflect on it when you're older, and you think that was so silly, but at the time it seemed important. Just like now. Are you aware of the things in your life now that maybe the future you would look back on and say, that was so silly? Why did I spend so much of my energy and my time focusing on that? Let's say politics, right? There's a lot happening in politics right now, and it's causing people to do extreme things on all sides, But the most extreme thing to do of all is to expend so much energy battling, whatever's happening, reacting to things, right? You can spend every day just reacting to some negative news headline. But then what's your life? Is that living? And your life just becomes an endless cycle of reaction. Reacting. And every day there's more to react to. And you could just read every news article and react. And then you just really have to think, is that, 20 years from now, are you going to look back at that and say, that was a very good use of my time? I'm so glad that I spent endless hours enraged by whatever I read in the morning. It just becomes your life. In some sense, you are what you think. You put food in your body, you physically become what you feed yourself, and you also mentally become what you feed yourself. So if you feed yourself with content that enrages you, then that's who you become. And we talked about the me is conditioning, right? It's the knowledge that you store. You are a bundle of memories, a bundle of experiences, and what those experiences are help shape this me, which is exactly that, the conditioning that you feed it. I mean, you have to be able to see that from a larger perspective anyways, to understand who you really are and what is the me and I that I use sometimes casually without even understanding what that is. Which is why it's so important to know yourself, to know what is this me that I talk about so much. What is this I really? Like, not just superficially, like, well, of course I know that. No, you're fooling yourself. You don't know. And if you know, it's different than just thinking you know. You have to really go into it. You have to investigate. It takes energy. And this is energy that we're wasting on distractions. These distractions that I just mentioned. We spend so much energy getting ourselves worked up over this and over that and everything. And then we become part of the problem that we think we're fighting. So it's so easy to find an enemy and say, that is my enemy and I must fight that and I must do something, right? Like, what, I must do something. I see this happening and I must do something. That's a reaction. What are you going to do? Cause more violence in the world? Cause more harm in the world? Bring more hate into the world? And this doing, we always feel like we need to be doing something, right? Busy. And otherwise we're unproductive. So it often starts with this, how we've been conditioned and raised in our societies to be productive citizens, productive people, right? Produce in your job, produce in your life. And then if injustices are happening, you must fight the injustices. You must produce results. And I see so much of this venom appearing, and I think there's no love in that, right? There's no love in reaction. It's just a different form of hate. And love has its own power and energy, and it's not to react to what's happening. And this is why I feel that it's important, and maybe another reason, besides this being my daily journal, that I'm talking this way, because I feel like we're losing our way as a society, and we're getting caught up in the whirlwind of change, and things are happening so fast, and no one, is like stepping back. I don't want to say no one, I don't know what everyone's doing, but many people are not really getting to the root of it all. What is the root of all of the problems in our world? What's the root of all the problems in your life? And this is important because we tend to focus on the world as an abstract idea. What is the world? What is society, in quotes, other than you? Like society is not an abstract thing. We talk of it sometimes as if society is like an organism by itself, but that organism is all of the individual people that make it up. So in that sense, you are not different from society. You are society. And I'm trying to be careful with my words, because I can say society is composed of individuals, but that assumes that there is an individual, which may itself and is itself a false assumption. But that being what it is, clearly society consists of, the way we normally define it, all of us. We're all part of society. So society is what we make it. But then it's so easy to go, well, okay, but that society is like everybody and I'm just one person. What if everyone thinks that way, right? Then society becomes a mindless beast. Because then we think, well, there's nothing I can do. Society is millions of people. I'm just one person, so there's nothing I can do. So you just go along with it. Because you think there's no way that society can change no matter what I do. You feel completely helpless, right? And you feel like, well, why should I do anything? And really, it's funny, because I think so many people just reach that point where it's a point of silent desperation, right? That I don't know what to do. I see so many problems. I feel helpless. Maybe I'll just complain on social media all day long and something will change. And all the while not really seeing the part they play, the responsibility that everybody has to society, you know, and not to think of yourself as one, like get rid of the numbers, because the numbers are what's thwarting you, thinking you're one of many. So when you think you're one of many, you think your way out of thinking that you can do anything about it. You think that one can't possibly change the many, but you're losing sight of the fact that there is not just one. You've created a subdivision, then you've analyzed it, you've counted, and we talked about measuring. You've measured and said, I'm too small. I'm just a small part of this whole. I can't do anything. Therefore, I'll just live my life full of distractions, getting angry every day, and living a dark life full of hate at whatever my chosen enemy is. And then you say, that's great, I'll just do that until I die, and that's my life. But it all starts when you think of it, though, right? It starts with thought telling you that you're small. Well, are you small? You're only small when you measure yourself or compare yourself against what you perceive to be a larger thing. If you didn't measure, maybe you would have no idea that you were small, and your actions would not be driven by this sense that you are insignificant. You know, Gandhi once said, everything you do is insignificant, but it's very important that you do it. And that comes from a really truly understanding of what significance is and what insignificance is, and that there is no insignificant. And we know from physics, right, there's an effect called the butterfly effect, which says a butterfly flapping its wings, you know, in one part of the world can affect whether a hurricane happens or not in another part of the world. So and what this is sort of related to chaos theory. Anyone who's seen Jurassic Park, you know, has gotten at least a cursory introduction to that. But in dynamical systems and mathematics, there's something called the sensitive dependence on initial conditions, which basically just says that a dynamical system, a system that describes the evolution of states over time, and we've talked about that somewhat previously, whether it's discrete time or continuous time. So the systems that we talked about previously, you know, that are evolving in time, and states, you have state transitions that occur, and we call that evolution in time. And you can just show mathematically that those systems can sometimes be very sensitive to very small changes in the current state. The current state can be slightly off, and then you can find that it leads to completely different outcomes down the road based on that current state. So perhaps each of us can be a butterfly, influencing the state of society in some way that we can't even imagine the effect of, because it's much bigger than us. And our little mind can't conceive of the change that can come about. Which is why thought can't do this. Thought can't solve this problem. We're too limited. We're finite little creatures with very limited intelligence that cannot predict the outcome of events very well. Even our best mathematicians, can predict only so much, although weather prediction has gotten better over the years. There are things we can do to improve, but it's always probabilistic. There's always uncertainty, and that uncertainty grows over time, which is one of the reasons I actually call that Lyapunov exponents are one measure of how paths diverge over time, which can be some measure of how uncertainty, just a small amount of uncertainty, can grow to a large amount of uncertainty later, which means inherently it's very hard for us to predict the future, right? It's just an inherent limitation to being able to predict things, right? So the point being, we can't predict the consequences of our actions. And even with simple mathematical models, let alone the complexity of the world. So and the reason I'm even going into this is as a counter argument to this whole idea that what I do is insignificant and unimportant and it shouldn't matter and therefore I should do nothing, is a false conclusion that you reach by letting your thought drive you to that conclusion. You have to examine that. Why is that so? Is that so? And if you dig into it, you'll find it's not so. And I'll just, jump to the conclusion, right? And I don't like conclusions, because conclusions means you're not thinking. You need to go into it and not come to a conclusion, because a conclusion means you've stopped thinking. Don't stop thinking. Continue thinking. Continue inquiry. Inquiry is a living process that should never end. Truth is a thing that every day is evolving and different, and not different, but it's a thing. It's not a static thing. It's a living thing, right? So you can't observe a living thing by concluding based on yesterday's results what you think today is going to be, because every day is different, right? So don't extrapolate from yesterday's conclusions to today. Today is a new day. Every day is new. When I come to walk here, it may seem like the same day, but it's not the same day. It's a new day. It's a different day. So life is inherently unpredictable. So don't draw conclusions based on your limited little brain that what you do is insignificant and therefore you shouldn't do it. It's the opposite of what Gandhi said. And that's what almost everyone does. They reach that conclusion that I'm too small. But what they're not, even mathematicians know this, right? That study equations, is that that's not even true even in the physical world that we can observe. We can see that small changes can have large effects. So don't think that way. And don't worry about the world when deciding what you should do. Because you can just throw your hands up and give up, or do what's right yourself, right? And it doesn't matter what the outcome is. You don't have to think about the outcome or predict the outcome, because you can't. You can't say what the outcome is, and we may say, well, I don't know, we're too far gone as a society. We can't correct ourselves. We can't recover from this, so it doesn't matter. I'm just going to drink myself into oblivion and eat and, engorge myself or do whatever, just indulge in pleasures, whatever my pleasures are: food, drink, social media, TV, debauchery, whatever. Take your pick at what your favorite distraction is, or read endlessly and become trapped in an inner world of ideas rather than living in the real world of truth. Not that I'm downplaying reading, I like a good book here and there, but don't lose yourself in it, because you can. It's another distraction. or immerse yourself in some field of knowledge, endlessly acquiring knowledge in that field because you feel like you're at least being productive. You're a productive member of society, you know? But are you really? Like, you're gonna die. And all that knowledge you've accumulated in your brain is gonna go away. So what's the point in all that accumulation? And well, I'll write a book, and that book won't go away. Well, that book ends up on a shelf somewhere or digitally published, and maybe someone else will read it, maybe someone won't read it. You have no idea. So don't plan your life based on permanence. You know, thinking that knowledge in your head is permanent, or thinking that there's a permanent solution to everything, or a permanence to anything, because there is not. We've gone through that too. Nothing is permanent, nothing is changing. So, I mean, you can just come to so many false conclusions by thinking. And this is, I think, why am I going down all these paths? Is just to show you how many directions thought can take you. And I'm not suggesting or denying or really saying anything about any one particular direction, but just observe how thinking can take you down all these paths. Right? And that's really what I'm doing here. I'm just sort of like exploring possibilities of how thought can take you one way, take you the other way. Which is the right way? You'll never know which is the right way. That's why you can't choose. You, as an individual, as a limited being, cannot find the path to truth, because there is none to begin with, but your mind can go in so many different directions that how do you know which is the right direction? This is another important point. How do you make a choice? What is a choice? A choice is a sign of confusion. A confused mind has to choose because it doesn't know. It doesn't have enough information, right? It can't come to a conclusion. You know, you have limited knowledge, so when you're faced with a decision or a problem and you feel like you have to choose, and what that's really saying is, I am at a point where I am confused, and there are, say, two possibilities in front of me, and I need to pick one. So I'm going to analyze it and try to acquire knowledge about each, and try as hard as I can to predict the outcome of whether I go A or B. But what do we just say about prediction? You can't predict. Even if you spend all your time acquiring like near perfect knowledge about what's happening and all this, you can never ever perfectly predict the outcome of your actions. But yet a choice is exactly that. It's a weighing of prediction, right? I'm trying to predict the outcome of A versus B. And then I'm saying I'm going to choose the outcome that I believe leads to my desired goal. So you set some objective for yourself or goal, and you try to make a choice based on that. But it's flawed in every single way. It's flawed in the fact that you'll never acquire perfect knowledge to the degree that you can make a perfect decision. It is impossible. There's no end to knowledge, right? There's no end to knowledge unless you understand knowledge and its limitations. There is no acquiring of knowledge that will lead to perfect understanding. So perfect understanding does not come from the acquisition of knowledge. Not to say there isn't perfect understanding, but it's not based in knowledge. So you are inherently confused and faced with a choice, and you don't know what to do. So you research it, and you spend time. So time comes into play again, right? This is all a process of time now. It takes time to do the research. It takes time to figure things out. And then you still don't really know what to do. But in the end, you just choose A or B, and you suffer the consequences either way. And maybe you did, despite your best research, you find, oh man, this didn't turn out the way I expected. I mean, isn't that always true? I mean, isn't it almost always true that whatever you choose, you imagine an outcome that never actually arises? Maybe similar, or maybe completely opposite. Just pay attention to that. Pay attention to the fact that how many times have you made decisions and it just didn't turn out the way you thought. But you get frustrated over that, rather than realizing that is the inherent reality and truth of things. Is you shouldn't be frustrated by that. You can't predict it. No matter how much knowledge, no matter how much thinking you would have done, you can't change what's going to happen. You think you can, and you think if you just made the perfect decisions, right? And people can become control freaks this way, because it's like things have got to be this way. In order to get the perfect outcome, we need to do this, that, and whatever. And everyone has done that to some extent, including myself. That's not to say you don't try to make the best decisions, but you have to acknowledge the imperfection of your ability to predict, which means you never can have enough knowledge to make a perfect decision. That making a decision based off thought is always going to be flawed. It's just the way it is. It's unavoidable. It's a law of nature, right? So it's not an imperfection in yourself. It is the way things are. The equations of mathematics can tell you that's the way things are. But you don't need any of that. Just you observe your own life and see how the decisions you've made have never always led to what you thought. You are not now where you thought you would be when you were younger. Your life has taken different paths, and boy, you never would have predicted it. I would never have been able to predict where I am now, almost at any stage in my life. Even a week ago, I don't know exactly where was I going to be next Thursday. So, but how much time we spend and how much energy we spend in that attempt to predict, attempt to make our life perfect, to make the right choices in every situation, stressing ourselves out, becoming anxious over, not knowing what to do. And to what end? To the same end for everybody. Life is what's happening while you're making other plans. Another great quote that I've always loved, which also points to the reality of that life is just what's happening. You don't have control over it. Your choices, you may think, are going to lead to certain outcomes. They are not always. Sometimes you'll get lucky and some part of it might be true, but only in an imperfect way and infrequently. Maybe some more frequently than others, but never all the time, never perfect. So this goes back to what I said about choice being a state of confusion. Choice is reflecting a confused mental state. So see that. See that every choice is really just a reflection of my own confusion. And then you may wonder, is there another way? Is there a way of acting and behaving, and is there another action driven not by thought, but by something else that is perfect, always right, never wrong? It can't come from knowledge. We know that, so we have to throw that out. And it's a really good question to ask. Is there another way of living? Is there another way of living that is not based on this finite knowledge, not based on the confusion of choice, the endless struggles, ambition, whatever it may be, the focus on me as an individual, or whatever I think is important? So that's a question that should be posed to the mind, not concluded either way as yes or no, because again, the conclusion itself is inherently flawed. So to reach a conclusion is a flaw, because you don't know. Your conclusion could be wrong. All conclusions can be wrong. So that's also not the way. So you can't reach a conclusion. Because, and this is what's important, right? Every conclusion is a belief. I believe this is true. I've acquired evidence. It's led me one way or the other. My belief is this. But you've never removed uncertainty completely. You're always not quite sure about your conclusion. Be honest with yourself. Because you're not honest with yourself if you think, I know I'm making the right decision. I know this is right. You've convinced yourself that's true. That's thought speaking to you, giving you false confidence. You don't really know. Anything can happen. from the time you think you make your decision to when you make it, circumstances even change while you're trying to make your decision, because decisions take time in that analytical way. It takes time, and things are constantly changing. So you're focused on the past state you're analyzing, while everything's changing around you, impermanence again. So everything's changing so rapidly that you can't even, it won't stay still long enough for you to make a decision. So what are you going to do? This sounds hopeless. It is hopeless to the analytical mind. That's the point. That's the dissatisfaction. That's the recognition of the finiteness of knowledge, the limitations of knowledge. Understand that. See it. It's not a statement that I'm making that somehow is fantastical. It's something that's happening in your life every single moment of every single day. You are faced with decisions, with choices. You realize the uncertainty of everything, yet you still move forward. You may beat yourself up because you think you've made a bad decision in your life, or whatever you have come to, whatever conclusion about yourself, which is another horrible thing. Don't conclude anything about yourself. You may say, I'm dumb, or I'm an addict, or I'm whatever, right? You've concluded something about yourself. Don't do that, because it's not right. These conclusions are not right. So what else is there? If not this, what? If I can't make a choice, if I can't come to a conclusion, then what else is there? Well, the natural inclination there is to use the analytical mind once again to find what else is beyond the analytical mind. That's futile. The analytical mind can't find what is beyond the analytical mind. You can't think your way to unthinking. You can't think about the end of thought. I mean, you can, but thinking isn't going to end thought. Any more than water isn't going to dry a surface. It's like you can continue to splash water on a surface hoping that it becomes dry, or just figure out that water is the problem. And water has to be completely removed or evaporated in order for a state of dryness to be. So in a similar way, thought is like the water. You can't continue to splash it and hope that it will dry something out. You have to see that water is the problem. Let it dry out. Because then, and only then, will what else there is come into being. Or is there already? Not come into being as if it didn't already be, but it's just you're fooling yourself with thought. Just give it a break, in a sense, right? Give it a break. Like, see what happens if you're not always obsessing over whatever it is that you're obsessing about, or whatever you think you need to think about. Let it go, and not let it go as another action of thought. Well, now how do I let it go? Now I have to figure out how to let it go. That's when you go down all the false paths of meditation, all the people offering you solutions in traditional religions. And I know the way. I know how to help you let it go. I'll teach you. Pay me $500 an hour. I will teach you how to let it all go. Just like somebody saying, pay me to teach you how to see with your eyeballs. And it's all silly. It's all driven by thought. Those people have come to a conclusion that they know the way, and they're going to teach it to you. For money, of course. Maybe some without money, but then there's something behind it. There's some motive behind anybody who wants to teach you, to become your teacher, your guru, or whoever. There's a motive. And you may uncover the motive, you may not uncover the motive. The motive may be the very propagation of their ideas about all this, right? The very propagation of their way, their method, could be enough to drive them to think that's still not pure. That's another formation of thought which is limited and flawed. And you see where almost everything ends in that bin. Through every discussion that we've had, This is repetitive. It's repetitive because it's the truth. It's like saying, it's like playing golf, mini golf, where the slope is all slanted around the hole, and no matter where you put the ball, it's going to end up in that hole. It's going to roll down. No actual mini golf course is designed like that, obviously, but like a funnel, you know. But that's what this is like, because you can't escape the truth. No matter where you start, no matter where you think you're at, the truth is there. It's inescapable, right? And it's not to be arrived at through thought. But like every time we start, we almost end in the same place, which is thinking is the source of all these troubles. And you know, it's like I can say that, and you no, you're not right. It's just there's good thinking and there's bad thinking, right? Now that's what you may think, and I just need to find the good thinking and leave the bad thinking aside. It's almost what everyone does. They think there's a way of good thinking, and that's why they pick a particular belief, tradition, ideology, political persuasion, nationality, I mean, whatever, take your pick, because every one of those things, that's the good thinking. My belief system is the good thinking, everybody else is the bad thinking, and I'm going to stick to that, and that's it. I'm concluding that. What if you're wrong? How do you know your thinking is the good thinking? Who's deciding? The thought? The imperfect thought that we've already endlessly discussed never can have enough information to predict the future, to understand with perfect clarity what is right or wrong, is going to be the deciding factor. How did you pick your good thought system? If you were already perfect, you wouldn't need to pick anything. You'd need to make no choice. But the very fact that you say, I've made a decision, I've picked this particular belief system as my belief system, and I'm going to adhere to it. When you made that decision, are you absolutely sure? Because the only way you'd be absolutely sure is if you were already perfect, but you're acknowledging you're not, but I'm going to pick this belief system. So an imperfect mind has decided that this grouping of thoughts is somehow better than this other grouping of thoughts. You see the silliness of it all? You can't escape it through any thought-based process. You end up going in circles, oscillating like a pendulum between this and that and the other thing, until it's like endless, and then you realize, have I really moved at all? Like, I'm in the same place I was when I started. Because you've stayed within the realm of thought, and within those limitations of thought, you can never escape. You can never escape the limitations of thought by remaining within the realm of thought. How could you? Even the logic of those words, be sane. Look at those words and understand that. And you then just say, wait a second, so no thought system, no belief system, because they're all rooted in thought. Thought has created this world with all of its problems, and thought is the reason we're fighting each other endlessly in this world, and thought is why I'm greedy, and thought is behind all of the harm in society. You're saying I can't just throw away the bad thought and keep the good thought. It's like, no, because it's the inherent imperfection of thought itself as this limited mechanical process. It's not good and bad. There is no good and bad thought. Thought is thought. It arises from the same process in the brain. So all thinking is the same. And if you see that, all thinking is the same. All thinking is just this mechanical, physical process occurring in the brain that leads to what we call thought, which then leads to everything in our society. What we may consider good, what we may consider bad, is all just coming, it's like a fountain that's coming from the same source. So you can't differentiate the good and bad because the source is the same. The source of thought is the same. So what makes one thought good and one thought bad when they're coming from the same fountain? You can't, you have to see that. Then you stop trying to find the good thoughts. and trying to sift thoughts into the good pile and the bad pile, and you inherently see the limitations of thought, and then maybe there's an ending of thought. The turn the fountain off, because that fountain is just an endlessly moving stream that's driving you in an imperfect way through your life, choice after choice after choice, decision after decision, filled with uncertainty, filled with doubt, never knowing if you're doing the right thing, never knowing what the right thing is, and you will live in that state of anxiety until the day you die, and the end. Or is there a way out? Is there an ending to that process? And not an ending in the sense of your brain stops, because obviously death is the ending. I mean, the physical death of the organism ends the brain, which ends thought. Right then and there. But is there an ending before that? While you're young and vital and strong? Is there, can you understand, can you bring that mental death, not suicide? We're not talking that. We're talking the ending of thought in the same way that thought will end when you die. The same way that you will lose everything in your life. All attachments will end. Everything you're worried about right now, you will lose it, because you won't exist anymore. It's pretty clear your body will dissolve upon physical death, and your brain is part of that. So if you have any understanding that thought is linked to the brain, some people refuse to even believe that. To see that, it's not a belief, right? I mean, you can experiment, you can see that thought is related to the brain, and the brain will end. But then they still want to say, yes, but I feel like there's something of me that's going to go on. What part of you is going to go on? What part of you is not in that brain? What thought of you? Like, when you think of what you want to continue, isn't it your life as it is now, which all comes from thought and experiences? Isn't it like every memory you've had? You don't want those memories to end. You want to keep your memories, but memories are stored in the brain. We know people who get Alzheimer's and dementia and other diseases, they lose that memory. So those memories are not permanent. They can be lost within our own lifetime while we're even ostensibly alive. So you want those memories to continue? Where are they stored? Where are those memories going to be stored if not in the brain? You're going to invent some other brain that exists outside of your physical body that works just like your brain but doesn't die? Do you see how silly it becomes? You don't go into it. You just accept, I will continue, I will go on, I will exist somewhere, and you're too afraid to look at the truth about it. And that fear prevents you from seeing the beauty of truth, what actually is, not what people have told you. And that truth is more beautiful than anything anyone's ever told you. But you can't see that as long as you hold on to those beliefs that you as an individual are going to continue. That your brain, somehow your thoughts are not just stored in your brain, they're stored in some ethereal realm that will continue when you pass away. And that leads you to live a life of delusion. Why not live a life of truth? If the truth is that all that's going to end, which by every measure is what you can observe if you just open your eyes and look. My thoughts will end, my body will end, all my worries will end right along with all that. My house, everything that I'm worried about now, that every day I'm, battling to survive, to make enough money to live, to pay the bills, to do whatever, that's all going to end. And guess what? You don't have a chance to negotiate with death. When that day comes, you're not going to be having a conversation with death and negotiating and maybe saying, well, can I just have one more day, one more moment, one more second? You will have no more second. You won't have one moment longer than when the heart stops and the body ends. That's the end of this body and mind. So you can see the truth now, or the truth will come upon you, but you can't escape the truth. So you can live in delusion and not accept the truth, It's not about accepting either, because accepting is like the wrong word. It's just there to see. We open your eyes and see. And then what happens when you see? Right? Don't imagine it. It's not, because now thought wants to know if there's a reward for this. Well, if I do that, then what's my reward? Well, if there's no you, there's no need for a reward. There's no permanent you that exists. What do you want a reward for? There's no reward for knowing truth. It's just truth. It's not, you can't negotiate with it. You can't negotiate with the tree and say, well, I will believe you, tree, or I will see you, tree, if you provide me with something. Like, you have to be an apple tree, or I don't believe you're a tree, because I need something to see that you are a tree. No, the tree is right there. The tree is in front of you, whether it produces fruit, whether it doesn't produce fruit, whether it does anything for you or it does not do anything for you. Do you want to see the tree, or do you want to delude yourself to not see the tree? And it's just that realization that there is not a reward for what's true. That true is just true. It's inescapable. You can't escape truth. You can't run away from it. You can't delude yourself. You can build a fantasy of thought that you think is allowing you to be more secure, but in the end, the truth is there. The truth is, you will die. And everything that you know will be taken away from you at that moment, and all your lifelong struggles, what have they ended up in? So again, what do you want your life to be? And this goes back to the significance question. This goes back to, what should your actions be in life? And what is life? Is there another way of acting outside thought? And a lot of this started because we were trying to investigate how you should live your life, and whether it should be based on all these choices and decisions and be caught in delusions, or or should it be truth, not delusion? And this thinking that what I do is insignificant. Is it really insignificant? And again, there should be no decision about whether doing the right thing is significant or insignificant. It's the right thing. And if you use thought, you can come to either conclusion. I shouldn't do the right thing because nobody else is doing the right thing. So why does it matter? It will make no effect. It's like how people think about voting, right? They'll say, well, my vote doesn't matter because it's just one vote. But collectively, people can vote, and there can be change, right? There's a power to the whole that you could, through analysis, decide my vote doesn't matter, but it can matter, right? It can matter very much, but more. It's probably the wrong analogy here, because it's still a mathematical problem, right? Votes are numbers. You can count them, and you can say one number out of the whole is insignificant statistically, right? And you could, but if everyone thought that, right, then, and no one voted because everyone thought their vote was insignificant, the entire whole would collapse. And no one would vote, and then there would be no purpose to it. So you have to see the significance that is beyond of the individual, which is not the individual. And everything that you do in your life is insignificant, but it is very important that you do it. And this is why you can't find ethics and morality through thought, because thought will lead you to act or not act. When truth acts, it doesn't decide to act or not to act. The seeing is the doing. To see the truth is to act, and there's no choice. Once truth is seen, there's no choice anymore. I can't choose that tree to be there or not be there. It is there. And there's no decision then to be made that, well, I may decide that I don't want to believe that tree is there. When truth is there, there is no choice anymore. There's no action there's no decisions to be made. And everything you do is right. And it's not right because you've decided it's right. And that's important. So you're not making the decision, right? You're not the one making the decision. So how can you be right or wrong? And that's the idea, right? When the I, the me, is not making the decision anymore, there's no me to blame that can get it wrong. There's no wrong anymore because things just are, and they're just happening, and there's a flow, just like in nature. I mean, I don't think any of these plants are thinking about whether they're doing the right or wrong thing. They are just doing. They are acting in their nature, and look how beautiful it is. And there's no expectation of perfection. There's no expectation of permanence. Every plant can be trampled upon and destroyed, but there's another plant, and taken as a whole, it's a beautiful thing, and it doesn't need anybody telling it what to do. I mean, with the slight exception that, yes, this is manicured by humans. They've set a lot of these plants up. You know, there's a certain amount, but it doesn't matter. I mean, we didn't create these plants. These plants are inherently, they've evolved through nature to be who they are now. And they're acting according to their natural behaviors and tendencies to do it. They're not thinking about it. There's no thought involved in a plant growing, right? It's just growing. It's happening. So in that way, you can say truth is just what happens when thought gets out of the way. And then there's no right or wrong way for the plant to grow. And then there's no right or wrong way for the actions. But you have to be careful here, because you can think your way into thinking that you've ended thought. And then you are just doing more thinking. So we're not talking about saying, okay, now I understand. I need to end thought. I need to not let thought. So now I'm going to find a way to do that. You're stuck. It's not finding a way to do anything. It's the stopping of the search for finding anything. But it's also not inaction. It's not inaction. It's maybe more action than ever. It is the action of truth. It is a different form of action. And it comes from a different place, if you want to say it that way. It doesn't come from thought. But we're not going to say where, because that is not the right way to look at it. Because where, now we're still seeking. Well, where? I want to know where. Does it come from Detroit, Chicago? Where? You're back into the same thought process. The minute you ask where or how, so just see all that, right? It's not, there's no way out by continuing to try to come to conclusions or acquire more knowledge. And, but here we are talking about all this, right? And the only reason, like I said, is I just see many people distraught in the world, and there are many problems in the world, but we are not going to solve these problems by continuing down the paths that we are going. That is evident, and maybe that's the first thing you need to see. That the paths we're on are not going to solve it. Politics is not going to solve the problems. Religion is not going to solve the problems. They have been contributing to the problems. Science is not going to solve the problems. Science is just causality. Observing the causality of nature and of what's around us. There's no love and compassion in that. That is not going to solve the problems. What is going to solve the problems is really understanding what love and compassion is. Not intellectually, but understanding that that is what is lacking, and that it is because thought has become so important, knowledge has become so important, that has driven us away from really understanding what love and compassion are. I'm not sure that humans ever understood it. And without that understanding, we are headed towards destruction. So the first thing we have to see is the harm that knowledge, that this path and relentless pursuit of knowledge has brought us. And that all the problems that we have in this world have originated from thinking. If you don't see that, this won't make any sense, because you will still think there is a right path in thinking. There is a political party that is better than another. There is a religion that is better than another. There is a nation and government that is better than another. And you will continue down the cycle. That's what we've been doing. How many revolutions do we need in this world to show us that that never ends up in anything any better? It just repeats the cycles that have been happening in human society for as long as we can remember, and longer than that. And until there is a transformation in the human consciousness that brings about this understanding of the limitations of our thinking and leads to a more holistic understanding of everything, which is love and compassion. That holistic understanding is that. The ending of selfishness is that. You know, the ending of the desires of an individual, or the my, me. You know, you have to remove the possessiveness, because you may you may die for your country, right, as a soldier, which is, you know, or you may, you know, perform an act of, you know, for your society, right? But you're still doing it saying my group of people is better than this other group of people. That I'm willing to die for someone else, for my group of people. But it's that division again, the group of people, that, you know, if we weren't separated into groups, no one would have to die for anything. It wouldn't be necessary. There'd be no division, no war, no violence. When there's no division, there's no violence, because there's nothing to fight against another thing. For there to be violence, by necessity, there must be sides. This is why division, conflict, is ultimately caused by division, because there can be no conflict without division. Division must be there for one side to fight another. Think about it. Is it ever possible to have a war without two sides? The two sides have to identify themselves with the sides before there can be war. If they did not divide themselves, who would they be fighting? Themselves? There'd be no fight. You know, do people fight within their own? You know, yes, they do, but that's only because there's further factionation, where there's further division. Within the division, there is not fight. Within the, you know, if you agree with somebody, you don't fight with them. You fight with the people you disagree with. So disagreement is a form of division. I believe this, you believe that. We separate ourselves by our beliefs. Drives everything, all the problems. Just to see that, that you don't need to, just to see that division is the cause of all the. If we want to end wars, we have to end division. It's that simple. Nobody wants to do that, though. They like their divisions. I like my country. I'm patriotic. America first. That inherently creates division, because now I am better than you. I am more important than you. And you, on the other hand, are seeing this as a threat. So it leads to conflict and war. And what's happening in our world right now? Wars. War after war after war after war. The Russians fighting the Ukrainians, we fighting Iran. I mean, and countless other battles that are occurring around the world, because we've subdivided ourselves based on country name, based on nationality, ethnicity, race, you name it. Whatever. But realize that. Like, this is a realization, right? It's to realize that, wait a second, all conflict is caused by division. If there were no division, there would be no conflict. There's the solution. It's the solution. And it's so simple. It's right there. No one wants to see that solution. Everyone wants to say, I want to continue to divide, but I want to have peace. So we have a United Nations, which by its very nature is almost contradictory. We want to divide ourselves up into nations, and then we want peace amongst those nations. It is only a temporary peace, as we see. You may create the United Nations, and these nations may live peacefully for a while, until some difference between these nations arises to the point where there is now going to be war, and they have war anyways. How many wars have we had since the United Nations has been around? That hasn't solved our problems. Why? Because the very division into nations is the problem. You can't have a United Nations. It's almost a contradictory thing. United, which means one, nations, which means many, subdivisions. So you're uniting division? You see how insane that is? This is why we aren't even thinking clearly in a rational way, and we expect there to be peace in this world. Well, we don't want to give up what we like. We want there to be peace, but we don't want to give anything up. I still want my nation. I still want my belief system. I want all the things that divide me from somebody else, but then I also want peace. You can't have it that way. As long as you divide yourself and separate yourself from other people, there will be conflict. I mean, two people from two different religions, right? They adhere strongly to their respective belief systems, and then what do they do when they sit down together? They may tolerate each other. We talk about tolerance. Tolerance is simply not getting up and strangling the other person even though you want to. That's what tolerance is. It's a suppression of the hatred and violence that you otherwise would express. Tolerance is not a good thing. It's not. Tolerance is, it's just covering it up. It's a reaction to the inherent violence that is there through division. Just dividing is violence. The act of dividing is a violent act. The act of saying I am separate from you because of my belief is violence. See that? Then you say there can be no division. I can't belong to any system, because in the belonging to that system or belief, which is why I belong to nothing. I don't belong to any organization, any belief system, any tradition, because the very act of belonging is violence. Because it propagates the division. And you can say, well, no, I'm going to belong to a peaceful group of people. That group is not peaceful if they subdivide themselves from everyone else. That is an act of violence. See that violence is more than just two people with swords and shields fighting on a battlefield. That's one form of violence. Violence is also comparison. Violence is comparing me against another person. That I'm better than that person, or that person is better than me, is a form of violence. Anything that separates or measures is an inherent act of violence. And guess what? Thought's behind it all. Thought is what compares me to another person. Thought is what creates the divisions of religion and nationality and all of that. And then what happens? We fight each other based on our religions. We fight each other based on our nations. We fight each other based on my family versus your family, or take your pick. See the truth that division is equivalent to conflict. If conflict is to end in this world, division must end. And it is only once we see ourselves as a unified human race, not see ourselves through thought, not work our way there through some reasoning process, but truly see that we are one world, one humanity, with no divisions, that conflict will end. And it will never end until that happens. And it's only going to happen if each of us has that realization or that transformation, right? And then from there, and even if one or a small group of people have that realization, And it spreads in the way that, you know, many things have spread, right? Not spread as an ideology, but to spread as an understanding, right? As a realization of truth. Truth that cannot be disagreed upon. See the truth, because this is all that is required. It is not believe anything. Don't believe a word I say. Just see the truth for yourself. And truth is something we can all agree on. We can't agree on beliefs, but we can agree on truth if we know how to see truth. If you don't see, then you can't see. If you don't see clearly, you will never see truth. So you can't just, you will distort the truth. But if you can see clearly truth with no distortion, it's the same. It's not different for everyone, right? The truth is the truth. The sun rising and setting is a fairly agreed upon truth. Mostly everyone will agree to that, even if they disagree with everything else. So use that as an obvious example of truth. But everything can be understood in terms of truth if one sees everything with such clarity. The same clarity as the rising and setting of the sun. The clarity of the truth of the grass under my feet right now is a truth. It's pretty unavoidable. Won't be many people that are sane, right? You could just be insane. But a sane person is one who sees truth, because truth is what can be understood by everybody to be the same. It's not, you don't argue about the truth. You don't argue about whether the sun is in the sky right now, unless you're insane. So, all right, that is enough. I'm sure that I have gone on a long time here today, and I'm just enjoying my walk and talking and enjoying talking. And I don't know, wow, 1 hour and 20 minutes. This is the longest I've ever talked. So I had no concept of time as I was talking today. The words are just flowing, and I don't know to what sense they make sense, but it's a process, a material process. So, all right, well, it was a nice walk, and have a good day, and get out and walk and be in nature, and maybe truth will come to you. Have a good day.